Hello, everyone. I hope you are fine. This is Oliver Twist by Charles Dickens, theme of social criticism or the conditions of England during the Victorian age. In discussing this theme, we are going to discuss some important issues related to some social ills found during the Victorian age that Charles Dickens highlighted in his story. Let's see what are these issues related to his social criticism. Dickens had an unsettled childhood, or in another words, he spent a miserable childhood. As a child, he was born in Portsea, then moved with his family to London, and afterwards in Chatham, then back to London. In London, he lived in a very shabby district, which means a very poor and bad area or place specified for the poor. So that's why there was no interest and care by the concerned authorities to this district or that place. Dickens, as a child, had to leave school in order to listen or to make less or to save the costs or the expenditures, as his father and the family were imprisoned in the debtor's prison or the prison specified for those who took money or borrowed the money from other people and failed to turn back this money. Only Dickens, as a child, was not imprisoned because he worked in a shoe blacking house. This miserable childhood affected him. His main purpose or his main target in his novels was to show the effect of poverty on the poor and the effect of restlessness or not finding comfort in life as a result of extreme poverty. Therefore, we always find in Dickens' novels a child point of view and a world of crime. In other words, Dickens is trying to highlight the negative effect of poverty on turning normal citizens into criminals. Dickens wanted to make people know of what was going on in their country in order to pave the way for social reform or correcting these bad conditions. The movement of reform started since he wrote Oliver Twist, which means the authorities reacted to what was mentioned in Oliver Twist by providing a series of reform. Dickens wanted the concerned authorities, السلطات المعنية, to take care of the slums, العشوائيات of London. He was interested in showing the negative impact or influence of the poor law. According to this law, it seems that this law will help the poor. But in fact, when you go deeper and analyze the articles of this law, you find that this law puts more burden upon the shoulder of the poor. Dickens protested against the conditions of England during the Victorian age or the second half of the 19th century. Oliver Twist as a novel is the embodiment of this protest. Dickens wanted to show people that the world of Workhouse اللي هي الملاجئ اللي بيقعد فيها الأطفال اللقطاء بس ملاجئ فيها عمل فيها شغل brings its dreadful harvest يعني ليها حصاد مرير of crime and vice من الجريمة والرذيلة. To express his anger and protest, Dickens used irony and exaggeration. These are the two technical devices used by Dickens in order to highlight his effect. By exaggeration, we mean hyperbole. Let's divide Dickens' social criticism into a number of points. The first point is his criticism of the world of the workhouse, or the refugees made for orphan and foundling boys, in which they received very little amount of food and a place to sleep in return for working hard all the day. In the workhouse world, there are more than one example of this dark world or ugly or grim reality. First, Mrs. Mann, of course, her name is ironical, which means that she is as tough and hard as a man. She is supposed to be responsible for the baby farm. The baby farm, the noun, the name itself of the place specified for caring for the young is ironical because it means that the government or the authorities considers them as small animals. Mrs. Mann receives from the authorities seven pence and half per small head يعني for a small head, and of course counting the young babies by head is to compare them to the cows or the sheep, which are counted by the word head per week. This means that the authorities pays for Mrs. Mann 7 pence and a half for every child every week. Is Mrs. Mann an honest woman? No, as she takes most of the money for herself and leaves only very little sum of this money to give food and clothes for the babies. So this is the first bad example which sheds the light on dishonest men of authorities. Mrs. Mann then tries to save another time from this rest. يعني the very little amount she gives to the young children, she thinks again and talks to herself that it's very large for this small baby, so she can save once more. So that her children suffer unimaginable cruelties. For example, a child dies as he is overlooked in turning up a bedstead. Another child is scaled or confined to death when there happen to be a washing. Further, those people who are responsible for running or managing the workhouse They are called ironically as the philosophers by Charles Dickens. The philosophers managing the workhouse, as Dickens called them, find that the workhouse has turned to a place of public entertainment. Of course, this is ironical because, in fact, the workhouse is a place of punishment for those young, innocent children. But the authorities or those who manage this place find it's a public entertainment for the poor classes, or a tavern, a bar, which there was nothing to pay, public breakfast, dinner, tea, and supper all the year round, and no work. This is the point of view of the philosophers or those who run the workhouse. Those philosophers see that they must set this to right, or they must correct this wrong. We will stop it all. So this is a second bad example of the cruelties of people who should help the young children. Thirdly, from inside the workhouse, the bowls or dishes in which the miserable children eat never wanted washing. Why? Because the young boys polished يعني بيلمع those bowls in their spoons till shown again. After this, they would sit staring يحملق يبرق at the copper with such an eager eyes as if they could have devoured the very bricks of which it was composed. They keep looking at the pot of food so that you feel that the young child will devour or eat the material itself from which the pot is made, employing themselves or keeping themselves busy. Meanwhile, or at this time, in sucking their fingers, expressing their extreme hunger. When Oliver leaves the world of the workhouse, we move to a second point or issue under social criticism, which is the issue of child labor. Oliver works with Mr. Sowerberry to help him in the funeral of young children. Mrs. Sowerberry was responsible for Oliver's food, so that she offers Oliver the cold bits of meat which were left for the dog. What is the reaction of Oliver? His eyes glisten or becomes happy at the mention of meat, even if this meat is left for the dog. This is because he never eats meat in the workhouse. So that Dickens comments, I wish some well-fed philosopher refers to one of the runners or the managers of the workhouse, whose blood is ice, which means cold-blooded, whose heart is iron, which means having a very cruel heart, could have seen Oliver clutching means catching the bits of cold meat that the dog neglected, which means that Oliver takes the pieces or slices of meat that the dog refuses to eat. Charles Dickens says that I should like better to see the philosopher making the same sort of meal, which means that Dickens wishes that those managers of the workhouse are put in the same condition as Oliver with the same relish بنفس النهم، يعني هم كمان ياكلوا لحمة يكون الكلاب رفضت تاكلها عشان يجربوا اللي حصل للفقراء. Let's move to a third scene about the funeral of a very poor woman who died out of starvation or extreme hunger. Her father and mother are going here and there, helpless. Mr. Sowerberry arranged the funeral. The priest is late. Children are playing hide and seek, استغماية, and jump over the coffin, يعني which means they don't respect the body of the dead woman and keep jumping over her. Mr. Sowerberry and Mr. Bumble sit by the fire or the warm place with the dark and read the paper. They are يعني careless about the woman. The old father and mother of the dead woman wait in the cold rain. The priest comes after an hour, which is very late. He reads the burial service as quickly as he can and finishes in 4 minutes. This is because the dead woman is very poor, so there is no one caring for giving her due rituals. Then they throw a can of water or a pot of water over the old father, and after some time they turn him out of the churchyard. Dickens wants to show the indifference, اللامبالاة, of the authorities to the death of the poor. Let's move to another issue or another element under the major title, the social criticism, which is the criticism of the world of slums, which breeds crimes. This world is presented by the artful Dodger, Fagin, the leader of the gang, and the Sykes. It's a world full of smoke and darkness. When Oliver rests and sleeps at Mrs. Mayley's just beyond the window, Fagin and the monks darkening the sunlight like two monstrous demons, shayateen. Nancy is one of the members of the gang, appears as a black shadow on the slimy steps of London Bridge. Sykes wanders or walks aimlessly in horror flight or escape away from the city after his murder of Nancy. The torches, الشعلات, throw light on the mud of Folly Ditch. يعني the torches or the light carried by people who are chasing Sykes after his murder of Nancy, illustrated how the ground is not paved well and how it's full of mud in a place called Folly Ditch. Then let's move to another aspect of social criticism, The scene of Mr. Fang's court is an example of social abuses. His presentation is his utmost impoliteness and pride, which shows the extent of the suffering of the miserable children who come under his control by their misfortune. This is a picture of Mr. Fagin in the court of law. So that Oliver Twist as a novel is considered an angry warning, تحذير شديد اللهجة, that any society that doesn't take care of its unfortunate children must face or must confront or must meet the problem of its criminals, as Fagin and Sykes. The novel is considered a protest on the moral principles at the Victorian age. Actually, Dickens does not provide any solutions for this problem, but he presents the conditions of England for the English people or people who are concerned in order to think themselves of reform. And I think he does succeed. Thanks for watching and goodbye.